Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into the AI Daily News Digest for March 22nd, 2025 today. So if you're looking for the most interesting AI developments and kind of want to cut through all the noise, well, you've come to the right place.
Yeah, absolutely. Tons going on right now from how these AI agents are actually built to, performance comparisons of some of the buzziest models out there. It's exciting stuff.
Definitely is. And one of the things that kind of jumped out at me, this deep research X AI builder thesis, it seems like, people are starting to really think differently about how we're going to build these AI agents in the future. What's your take on that?
Well, you hit the nail on the head, right? I mean, this idea is all about specialization and really creating AI that's more finely tuned. So instead of having one AI trying to do everything, imagine having one that just focuses on the user interface, right? And how we as humans interact with it. And then a completely separate AI that's doing all the deep research, the heavy data crunching in the background.
So basically like a team approach to AI, right? Dividing and conquering the tasks.
Exactly. And what's really cool about that is it could make AI so much more modular. You could swap out the UI agent, let's say, without touching all the research capabilities, right?
Yeah.
And that leads to faster development, better customization. It's really about optimizing each part for what it does best.
Makes a lot of sense. And talking about tools for building these AI agents, there's been some news about Anthropic's MCP tools,
Yeah.
something with LangChain, right?
Yeah. So Anthropic's model context protocol tools, MCP tools, are now much easier to use thanks to this new TypeScript library from LangChain. What's really great about this is it supports multiple servers. So,
Yeah.
Developers have more flexibility in how they actually use those tools in their projects.
So if I'm understanding correctly, this makes it a lot simpler for folks building AI agents, especially with LangChain.js or LangGraph.js, to actually integrate Anthropic's tech into their projects.
Yeah, exactly. Think of it like it just streamlines everything, right? All these different AI building blocks are now kind of talking the same language and working together seamlessly.
Got it. So smooth sailing for the developers. Now, I noticed there wasn't anything specifically about, NVIDIA's Llama 3.3 Nematron Super in the digest, but there was quite a bit of discussion around techniques for training large models. Anything in particular that caught your attention there?
Well, I think what's really fascinating there is we're seeing a lot of focus on really fine-tuning these training processes. There was quite a bit of talk about experimenting with these things called beta values,
Yeah.
pushing them to the extreme during training.
Beta values. Okay. Maybe a quick refresher on what those actually do during the AI training process. Sure. Think of it like this. These beta values are basically like dials that control the AI's memory. How much it remembers from previous training steps versus how much it focuses on the new data it's seeing right now. And what these discussions seem to suggest is that by carefully adjusting these dials throughout the training process, starting with a high value for one of those betas and then gradually reducing both.
Yeah.
It seems like that can really make a difference. Help the model avoid getting stuck and learn more effectively.
So even without a shiny new model being announced, this kind of like behind-the-scenes progress in training methods is really critical for the future of AI and potentially influences future models, from companies like NVIDIA, right?
Right. Absolutely. These improvements to training efficiency and effectiveness, they're fundamental to making progress. They'll definitely shape the development of those next-gen high-performance models that we're all waiting for.
For sure. So let's move on to something a bit, a bit different, but I think also very revealing about where AI is at right now. And that's, believe it or not, Sudoku puzzles. It came up in the context of LLM evaluation.
Yeah. And this is a good example of how AI can sometimes struggle with what we think of as simple tasks. So
Yeah.
we saw this case where someone asked ChatGPT for a simpler Sudoku puzzle after having trouble with a tougher one, right? And the AI's response, apparently without any sarcasm whatsoever, was basically like, "Oh, okay, here's one for beginners."
Almost funny.
Yeah.
But it really highlights the challenges in teaching AI to truly understand human intent, right?
Yeah.
And maybe the user was just expressing frustration and not literally asking for a kid's puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. It shows just how difficult it is to give AI that nuanced understanding of human communication and what we really mean. And it's interesting to contrast that with how Claude handled a different puzzle, the three chests. That was a logic puzzle, right?
Yeah. Claude took that one on. So how did its approach differ? What did it do?
Claude was much more analytical in its reasoning. It actively considered the possibility that the labels on the chess might be wrong. It really engaged with the logic of the puzzle, exploring all these different scenarios and understanding that there was a possibility of incorrect information. And that shows, different LLMs can have really different levels of sophistication when it comes to logical reasoning and really grasping the nuances of a problem.
So one AI took the request super literally, and the other one was like, okay, let's think critically about this, which is a pretty big difference in how they process even relatively simple things.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that evaluating these LLMs goes beyond just looking at benchmark scores. You got to look at how they actually interact in these more open-ended situations to really understand what they can do.
Totally. Now on to something that sounds pretty technical, SuiteRL. This was mentioned in some of the research paper discussions. What's the main takeaway there?
Well, SuiteRL is part of this bigger effort to develop what are called multi-turn LMM agents. So basically moving beyond these single one-off responses that a lot of LMMs give now towards more sustained, more complex dialogues.
Multi-turn agent. So that's like AI that can actually hold a back and forth conversation, right? Like remember what's been said and build on that.
Exactly. That's the goal. And SuiteRL represents some real progress in that direction. Being able to build these AI agents that can participate in more dynamic, more conversational exchanges where each turn actually builds on what was said before. And that's crucial for creating AI assistants that are truly helpful and sophisticated.
Absolutely. So switching gears a bit, something called spatial LM. This one really caught my eye. AI that can actually understand the 3D world. That sounds amazing.
It is pretty cool. So spatial LM is all about processing 3D point cloud data, right? So its goal is to really understand a scene, identify architectural elements like walls, doors, and then classify objects within that 3D space using semantic labels.
And I understand it can work with a bunch of different data types.
Yeah, very adaptable. It can handle regular video data, RGBD images that have depth information, and even LiDAR sensor data. So that makes it really versatile and applicable to a lot of real-world stuff, especially in robotics and autonomous navigation.
So picture this. You've got a robot using a camera or a LiDAR system, and it uses spatial LM to basically figure out the layout of a room and then identify all the objects inside it.
Right, exactly. And it's interesting because even though it processes this data that's not directly human readable, those point clouds, it outputs these things called structured 3D object graphs. And that's actually considered a form of language. It's how the AI represents its understanding of that 3D environment.
A language of 3D objects. That's a really, really cool way to think about it. And all this with relatively small models, right?
Yeah, remarkably so. It leverages Llama 1B and Kin 0.5B. So only 1.25 billion parameters to achieve all this. And people are really excited about that. A lot of surprise in the community that it can do so much with such a relatively small footprint.
I can see why. And already folks are brainstorming applications.
Oh, yeah. Tons of ideas. One that's being talked about is integrating it with text-to-speech for people who are visually impaired. So the AI could actually describe their surroundings in detail. And then another one, using it in robot vacuum cleaners, help them navigate and understand their environment much better. So really exciting possibilities for AI to interact with and understand the physical world.
Absolutely. Okay, next up, Q&3. Lot of buzz around this one.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of anticipation building for Quinn 3. This comes after the recent announcement of Quinn 2.5 Omni. So the Quinn family of models is definitely getting a lot of attention right now.
And early whispers suggest it could be a real game changer.
Yeah, the leaks and the community analysis, it all points to Quinn 3 being a very strong contender, possibly even rivaling, top-tier models like GPT 4.5. So people who are really into this stuff are definitely keeping their eyes peeled for the official release.
Can't wait to see what it can do. Okay, last but not least, some real-world performance comparisons. This time between Gemma 3, Mistral 24B, and QWQ 32B. Sounds somebody put these models through their paces.
Yeah, someone did share their own personal benchmark results, comparing these three models across a bunch of different tasks, and the findings are pretty interesting.
So in terms of coding and reasoning, who came out on top?
Well, QWQ30QB was the star when it came to local LLM coding and reasoning. It even outperformed DeepSeek R1 in some cases.
Yeah.
And it was way ahead of both Gemma 327B and Mistral 24B in those particular areas.
Impressive. But with that kind of performance usually comes a trade-off, right?
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
So QWQ32B It does have some pretty hefty VRAM requirements. So that means it might be limited in how big of a context window it can handle when it's running on a single GPU.
Yeah.
Even with tricks to reduce its memory footprint.
Okay, makes sense. So what about math? How do they do with math-related tasks?
For simpler math problems, both Gemma and QWQ did really well. Gemma was actually a bit faster. However, it does come with a more restrictive license. Mistral 24B didn't fare as well in this particular comparison.
And any word on their image capability, that's becoming a pretty big deal these days.
It is, and in that area, both Mistral and Gemma, they offer image processing capabilities,
Hmm.
which is something that QWQ doesn't have right now. So, the best model really depends on what you're trying to do.
It does sound like a mixed bag, and it seems like there was some follow-up questions and comments from the AI community about this comparison.
Yeah, definitely. People wanted to know exactly which version of the Gemma model was used in the test. And there were also some questions about whether the settings used to reduce Mistral's memory usage, might have affected its performance. Other models like Roca AI underscore Rika-Flash-3 and Ixiama Deep, they were also thrown out there as possible alternatives for people who don't have a ton of hardware resources.
Mm-hmm.
And one interesting thing, some users actually found QWQ32B to be really good at summarizing transcripts, sometimes even rivaling GPT-4 or 4.5 in that specific task.
So it really highlights the importance of understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each model, right? And how choosing the right one depends a lot on the specific task at hand.
Absolutely. And those ongoing discussions and comparisons, that's what really pushes the field forward, helps us understand these tools better and really get the most out of them.
Couldn't agree more. So that wraps up our deep dive into the AI Daily News Digest highlights from March 22nd, 2025. We've covered a lot of ground today, from advances in AI agent architecture to the latest progress in training techniques, some fascinating developments in spatial understanding, real-world performance comparisons, and of course all the excitement for the new models on the horizon.
And hopefully we've given you a good sense of what's happening in the AI world right now.
Yeah.
Those key insights without overloading you with too much information.
And to leave you with something to think about, with all these advancements in specialized areas like 3D understanding, with these powerful local LLMs emerging, what do you think those unexpected applications of the future might be? What's going to become commonplace in the next few years? It's a really exciting time to be following AI.
It really is. And we're just at the beginning. Who knows what we'll see next?
That's right. And we'll be back next time to explore it all with you.
See you then.